Yanji Chambur Sadan Yumi Jam, Loner Monum Jimbor Nabjata, Bakrutan Santo, Shirmando, Tumba Tuje Janla Kishom Sar Kum Shum Joni, Gunjong Sambi, Jean, Shanchu Sanhui, Santi Jean, Te, Shanchu Sanhui, Santi Jean. Jean Semchin Ryoa me pas dans le Dieu me pas qui veut dire Rikiva, Larbib Sambi Jean, Jean Chupsan, Santi Jean. Te Jean Chup Tobi Santi Jean de Givis Sava dans Sortam Chup Sorbi Semchin of Kiver dire Jori Jean of Jean Chupsan, Santi Jean. Te Jean Chupsan, Santi Jean de Givis Chu Tamchil Larni, puis Semchin of Kiver dire. Shanchu Sanhui Samkit Pa Dia Chimbo Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jean Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jean Te Topa Chimbo Yang Toprajiba Samchin Nam Kiveran Jero Jimbi Jean of Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jean Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jean Te Utoba Tamchi Yonso Tong Samchin Kiveran Jero Tsuchim Jean of Shanchu Sanhui Jean Te Shanchu Topi Santi Jean Te Samba Tamchi Tong Dan Jean Gyapji Leti Lam Yonsuf Chumba Simpson of Kiverin Giro, Zopi Jean of Shantusan with Santi Jean Te, Te Shantup Topa Santi Jean Teram, San Samchasani, Ganjam, Zopatan, Tarvatan, Jeanne Tambi Parol of Shimbi Simpson of Kiverin Giro, Sondi Jean of Shantusan with Santi Jean Te, Shantup Topi, Santi Jean Te, gave it two times to love Sondi Simpson of Kiverin Giro, Santon Jean of Shantusan with Santi Jean Te. Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jean Te na Chambadan Shivjin Ji Myambru Jopi Semchin of Kiveran Jiro. Sherib Jean of Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jean Te, Tan Shanchu Topa Santi Jean Te, Yang Tabanya Tangibi Semchin of Kiveran Jiro. Sabme Pav Jean of Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jean Te, Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jean Te, Shambadan Nyanji Tang Gawa Tang Tangnim La Nibi Semchin of Kiveran Jiro. The Young Namba Jean of Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jean Te, Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jean Te, number 12. Tamchi Yonsu Zamba Simpson, Tamchi Kiveran Jero, Talam Kibi Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jante, Dave Shanchu Topa Santi Jante, Taptang, Shopatang, Tamchi Lam Kibi, Simpson of Kiveran Jero, Shanchu Ji Chosum Chusodan Ji, Churnam of Shanchu Sanhui Santi Jante, Dave Shanchu Topa Santi Jante, Jamba Never of Jabatan, Yantabar Pomatan, Zamchi Kanatan, Wambotan, Stoptan, Shanchu Ji Yanlad. Lam Jiba, Semchin Nam Kiveran Jero, Yonsu Hova Semchin no, Shanchu Senhui Santi Jante, Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jante, Yondan Tamchi Jan Nam Navaran Jero, Mokum Gadarapta Javra Tambi Shanchip, Shanchip, Shanchu Sanwa Santi Jante, Te Shanchu Topa Santi Jante, Nanson Tamchi Shinda Chatjang, Mokum Nanson Tamchi Shinda Chatjang. Mokum get Maperin Juro, Mason Tamchan. Dernier de Flappy Renam Larnejan, Parole d'Orton, Malan, Shanchu San Santi Jante, Shanchu Topa Santi Jante, Ston et Giant Machaparin Juro, Gapchiliti Lamion Saturban, Shanchu Santi Jante, Shanchu Topa Santi Jante, Nibadan, Long Chopadan, Sambra Chopadan, Dembala Jisen, Jigby Signum, Gambadan, Jambadan, Kurmum Jebadan, Yav Dembadam, Kebad. Chakto tam chara dang no simji simba simme pa dang yang tak bartawa dang dambi simchen nang kiveran gyuru.
We are now continuing our teaching on the Vimalakirti Sutra. Before we formally begin, I would like to share a few thoughts with you. First of all, today is World Book Day. In order to dispel the darkness of ignorance within the mind streams of sentient beings, we should produce more high-quality books, and we must also read them. This practice of reading is very important. In our current era, it could truly be described as the age of amusement unto death. Everyone is deeply attached to all sorts of short videos and audio content. However, it has become quite rare for people to sit down and personally read meaningful and worthwhile books. So for each and every one of us here, just as students do in their schools, we should carry out various kinds of reading activities today. For our various study groups as well, serious and diligent study is actually very important. We are now studying the Vimalakirti Sutra together. In reality, This is a way for everyone to elevate their own wisdom through dedicated study. At the same time, it is necessary for us to read many other works, such as the commentaries written by ancient masters on the Vimalakirti Sutra and the explanations provided by modern scholars. I encourage you to also write down your own reflections and your personal insights from the text. All of these thoughts should be recorded. If you are able to do so, it would be very good to write a brief summary or reflection paper for each individual chapter of the Vimalakirti Sutra. Studying in such a thorough manner will make our practice very meaningful. Of course, this is not a compulsory requirement, but I hope you see that this is truly necessary when we study a sacred treatise. I often think to myself that in this brief human life, even while I was reciting the lineage prayer just now, I was reflecting that in this fleeting existence, to have the opportunity to read and recite such a Mahayana scripture, to have the opportunity to contemplate its profound meaning, and to constantly familiarize oneself with it and keep it in mind, while having the chance to put it into practice, is of tremendous and immeasurable significance within this short life. I myself feel a great sense of joy, rejoicing from the very depths of my heart. That is the first matter I wanted to mention. The second matter is this. All of you here should be clearly aware that we are now living in the 21st century. Buddhists of the 21st century may need to differ in certain respects from those of more traditional eras. Why do I say this? It is because in many earlier historical periods, people's traditional views were largely expressed through a specific outward form, such as through the liturgical recitation of rituals, or by participating in unique and special gatherings. The essential teachings were basically fulfilled through these methods, and this way of life has continued right up until today. However, as we have entered the 21st century, the world has become extremely open on a global scale. Various cultures are interpenetrating and blending in a very thorough manner. This makes our time a particularly unique era. All information is now literally at the fingertips of every individual. It is an age defined by the openness of information. At such a time, the most important thing for us as Buddhists is this. We must clearly understand the actual contents of what Buddhism teaches. This is why we strongly advocate the practice of study, contemplation, and meditation. In former times, one could recite the Buddha's name with a very sincere heart. Just reciting the Buddha's name was sufficient. In Chan practice, simply contemplating the koans was enough. Sitting in meditation alone was sufficient. But in the present day, what is perhaps even more important is to understand the reason why I am practicing Chan and why I am reciting the sutras. There are many principles within the teachings that we must understand. If you remain completely ignorant of these principles, and if the content of the Dharma is not very clear to you, then in this particular era, whether it concerns your own identity as a Buddhist or other Buddhists who might come to doubt your way of learning, you may even find yourself very easily cast aside by society. There is a real danger and a strong possibility of this happening. Therefore, as 21st century Buddhists, not only must we persist in all the rituals passed down from antiquity, none of these traditional practices should ever be abandoned. But what is even more important is to keep pace with this era and approach Buddhism with a spirit of learning. There are indeed some Buddhists today, those whom I personally know, especially within the lay communities, who have been extremely diligent for more than a decade. Just yesterday, someone told me that some of the study groups outside are doing exceptionally well. This was a comment made by a very wise individual. Whether it is in their regular study sessions, their group discussions, their writing, or their assignments, their commitment to learning is truly admirable, especially in an era such as ours. I myself also believe that Buddhists of the present era must certainly understand traditional culture, but more importantly, they must possess a persistent spirit of learning. I believe that if you study seriously, Buddhist teachings will certainly be able to keep pace with the times. They will not, due to the development of new era technology, become so incompatible with the world that they are abandoned or discarded, nor will they be considered outdated and no longer applicable or relevant. There will be no such situation. On this point, throughout our journey, speaking for myself, I can say that before the age of 16, I was simply a herdsman. I knew nothing at at all. I stayed on the mountains every day, holding a prayer wheel and prayer beads, keeping company with white clouds, pine trees, marmots, and yaks. That was the kind of person I was. But afterward, once I was basically in school, I actually performed very poorly at my studies. I especially regret now that I did not study hard at that time. There was no good environment for learning. There was no proper environment for learning Chinese, not to mention English. Even for the Tibetan language, there was no good environment. Every day was spent playing ball and getting into fights. There were many, many unhappy experiences. In truth, that should have been a very precious childhood. To have spent it in such a way is something I truly regret very much. When I see children nowadays who begin reading from a very young age in school and who encounter excellent teachers, I am especially envious. If I had been like that as a child, starting to study at 6 or 7 years old, by the time I reached the age for primary school, I would have already finished middle school. How wonderful that would be. I have always thought this, but there was no way to change the past. But later on, having not been very successful at school after I became a monastic, indeed from the year 1985, since coming here, I have been studying in a very diligent and sustained way. What have I realized through this process of study? Indeed, Buddhism becomes deeper the more you study it. The more you study, the more gains and insights you accumulate. This is not mere lip service on my part, said here today, merely to encourage everyone to practice Buddhism. It is not like that. This is my own personal experience. No matter who I am facing, if I am to speak from my heart, this is what I would say. This comes genuinely from my heart. And one could say, these are my most sincere words. There is no flattery or duplicity involved. This realization is very strong. So I truly hope everyone needs study. The second point I wanted to raise was about study. There were originally 2 or 3 more points to discuss, but I'm afraid we will not have enough time to finish. There are still a few more matters, but for today, if the internet connection holds, we can discuss them tomorrow. Let us first proceed with the teaching. Just to mention this in passing, as a Buddhist, the first essential quality is a love of reading. As we say, a Buddhist who practices lifelong learning, lifelong practice, and the lifelong benefiting of others is truly a person of immense meaning. Next, the sutra speaks of the Buddha telling Bodhisattva jewel accumulation. You should know that a straightforward mind is the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. When this Bodhisattva attains Buddhahood, beings without flattery or deceit are born in that land. What this means is that we are now discussing how a pure mind creates a pure land. Regarding this principle of a pure mind creates a pure land, what will the Bodhisattva's future Buddha land actually be like? As was discussed previously, it is impossible to construct a building in empty space. By the same principle, as a bodhisattva, one must certainly take possession of one's future Buddha land. What will this future Buddha land be like? For instance, if we simply build a yoga studio or a coffee shop, when first decorating and setting up such a venue, one would naturally consider what kind of beings will come to this place in the future. By the same principle, as a bodhisattva, what will his future Buddha land be like? What kind of land will it be? Well, the beings in that Buddha land are brought about through our present practice. Practice is extremely important. Actually, for some practitioners among us, those whose practice is quite advanced wherever they go, it is as though they are already dwelling in a pure land. Wherever they go, the experience is the same, no matter the circumstances. Wherever they arrive, they feel that way. For those whose practice is genuinely excellent, wherever they go, for instance, if they are in a city, they think, wow, it is wonderful here in the city. Looking at the beings one by one, each seems like a bodhisattva. It is wonderful. If that person lives in a quiet, secluded place, they feel lama kien. It is so comfortable here. In contact with any person, that person is like a bodhisattva. It is truly wonderful. Such a person is very kind-hearted. Their entire situation and their surrounding environment are both beautiful and good. However, if there are problems within our own mind, one might see every single person as some kind of demon or devil possessing an extremely fierce and terrifying appearance. Then, no matter which Buddha land that person visits, it will appear like a house of thorns. It would be terrifying to stay there. For many of us, our experience in practice is still very closely connected to our own state of mind. If the mind is in a certain state, So when we teach the Vimalakirti Sutra, this pure Buddha land that we are currently discussing is actually a kind of self-appearance of the beings themselves. This concept is close to the self-appearing Buddha lands described in the Guhya Garbha Tantra. It is fairly close to the view of self-appearing Buddha lands. However, they are not saying exactly the same thing. Gradually, this view becomes very similar to what is taught in Tantra. In fact, this perspective is very much in accordance with logical reasoning. Otherwise, if there were truly a substantial and solid Buddha land, it would be very difficult to establish its existence before a mind of pure vision. Therefore, what we are speaking of here is a sincerity mind. A so-called sincerity mind is a mind free from flattery and deceit. It is free from flattery and free from deceit, as the Abhidharma Kosha states. A mind that is free from flattery and deceit is actually the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. When the Bodhisattva attains Buddhahood, beings without deceit and flattery will appear before you, because you are now cultivating a mind free from flattery and deceit. You are currently training in this mind free from flattery. When you create your pure land in the future, all of your retinue at that time, who are beings free from deceit and flattery, will appear before you. Your retinue can also manifest at that time. Sometimes when we observe Amitabha's pure land, we see it has a very close connection with the aspirations of Amitabha's former lives. The reason is exactly like this. Therefore, what is being described here is that beings without flattery and deceit will in the future appear within your Buddha land. What is meant here by a sincerity mind is a mind that is very sincere and honest. In the Treatise on the Modes of Being, there is a chapter specifically on uprightness. A person's mind that is without cunning, without flattery, deception, or dishonesty is a mind that is very pure and genuine. Of course, some people might say, my mind is very straightforward. I just say things directly. Whether giving rise to desire or anger, or seeing others' faults and saying so directly, this kind of straightforwardness is not necessarily what is meant here. Sometimes when one lacks wisdom, one thinks that exposing everything before others is a virtue, but in reality it is not like that at all. A wise person knows how to consider the occasion. Although I may think this way inside, and my character may be relatively direct, what I think inside does not necessarily have to be said aloud. Patrul Rinpoche's words of my perfect teacher also states that what you think inside is not necessarily what you should say aloud. And regarding what you say aloud, you do not necessarily have to carry it out in action. For instance, sometimes I might give rise to anger, and after giving rise to that anger, it is immediately expressed. In words, I might say something a little excessive, such as, I will hit you, or I will kill you, but in reality, you do not actually go and do it. So sometimes when our mind is too direct, that is not necessarily the sincerity mind described here. What is truly meant by a sincerity mind here for us practitioners is a mind that is very upright, like Chan Master Waishan, who said in the Pointing at the Moon record, Chan Master Lingyu Waishan entered the hall and said, the mind of a practitioner is upright and without falsity. For a practitioner, the mind must be very upright. It should be without back or front, without deceit or falsehood, meaning one does not say one thing to someone's face and another behind their back. It is not like that at all. The mind should be very upright and without any distorted thoughts. The mind is very pure and genuine. Such beings will be born in this Buddha land in the future. That is to say, if I first cultivate such a mind, my future Buddha land will be such a land as this. This is the first quality. Among the masters and patriarchs of former times, it is said that this is the most fundamental quality. After establishing the foundation of a sincerity mind, the foundation of a profound mind is built upon it. What then is the profound mind? A profound mind is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When you attain Buddhahood, beings endowed with many qualities are born in that land. Regarding the term profound mind mentioned here in Tibetan, this profound mind is called ascertaining faith or faith of conviction. The profound mind referred to here means that the mind of the path is very firm and very stable. It is not easily changed by others. It is not what we might think of as a very simple mind, one that drifts back and forth and cannot settle for even a moment. It is not like that at all. This profound mind refers to a mind in our current practice that is especially focused and very firm. Such a mind is the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. When you attain Buddhahood because you possess this sincere mind and because you have this firm mind of the path, you will have accumulated all sorts of different qualities, whether it is the accumulation of merit or the accumulation of wisdom and all sorts of immeasurable qualities. With this profound mind, all of these will naturally manifest. For a bodhisattva, first having a sincerity mind is very important. It means having an upright mind. Built upon this, one should have a stable, very firm and sincere faith of conviction. This faith of conviction is not something that merely floats on the surface. It is not something that merely rests on the lips. There is a saying in the Sakya Pandita's treasury of good advice: the fool's learning hangs upon the tongue. The wise one's learning is stored in the heart. It is like straw that floats upon the surface of the water, while precious jewels sink to the bottom. This is a helpful metaphor. In reality, things are truly like this. A person whose wisdom is not very deep will constantly talk about what they know, even if they only understand a little. They speak with great fanfare. They are just like wheat straw. If you toss a little in, it all floats on the surface. But if it is a precious jewel, it will sink. By the same principle, the profound mind and the wisdom of a wise one could be described as being bottomless in its depth. There is simply no way to gauge its depth from the outside. When the occasion calls for it, wisdom will flow out in a great torrent. When there is no need for it, they do not go about parading and showing off before everyone. It is not like that at all. So for us practitioners, it is exactly the same. First, one must have a sincerity mind, and then, built upon this sincerity mind, one must develop a profound mind. This is the sequential path of practice. As Master Sengzhao and others have explained, their intended meaning is that this is a sequential form of practice. Moving forward from this, the sutra says, Bodhicitta is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When you attain Buddhahood, Mahayana sentient beings will come to this land. Having established a sincerity mind and a profound mind, one then generates supreme bodhicitta. As everyone knows, generating supreme bodhicitta means, from this moment forward, I will liberate all boundless beings throughout the universe. Furthermore, in the process of liberating beings, one leads them to the fruit of perfect and complete enlightenment. This kind of mind is called bodhicitta. In reality, what does this bodhicitta represent for the bodhisattva? It is the bodhisattva's pure land. So when you attain Buddhahood, every single being in your Buddha land will be a Mahayana practitioner. There will be no Hanayana. Just as when we speak of the pure land of Sukhavata, there are no beings of the lower realms in Sukhavat, nor are there any Shravakas or Pratyeka Buddhas. There are no beings holding wrong views there. Everyone is a bodhisattva with an altruistic mind. Therefore, if we generate supreme bodhicitta now, this very mind is our practice ground. As we often say, the mind itself is the practice ground. This statement has a very profound meaning. Before we truly engaged in study, contemplation, and practice, we might have only understood its literal meaning. Only through genuine study, contemplation, and practice does one realize that whether we first practice the Prajnaparamita or first cultivate bodhicitta, the qualities and benefits of bodhicitta possess a very special and extraordinary significance. I do not intend to elaborate on bodhicitta here. Every time we give a Dharma teaching, I have always taught everyone about bodhicitta. Its classifications, qualities, and benefits, as well as the boundaries of bodhicitta, are explained at great length in every Mahayana treatise. You should know them well. So if we cultivate bodhicitta, our future Buddha realm will be a Buddha realm of Mahayana practitioners. With these three minds established, namely a sincerity, a profound mind, and bodhicitta, this constitutes the sequential Mahayana practice. We also need these qualities in our daily lives. First, we must have what we ordinarily call an upright character. We should not have a mind of flattery, deceit, cunning, or craftiness. Built upon this is depth, which means having faith of conviction. Then upon that foundation, according to the Mahayana teachings, one must possess bodhicitta. This is our fundamental requirement. With these three minds in place, we begin the practice of the 6 paramitas. We start with the paramita of generosity. Generosity is the bodhisattva's pure land. When you attain Buddhahood, all beings who are capable of giving and renouncing are born in that land. Generosity is taught first. So what is generosity? Generosity itself is our Buddha land. This way of speaking is different from what is taught in some other exoteric traditions. Normally we would not say that generosity itself is a Buddha land. However, the practice of generosity will indeed shape the creation of my future Buddha land. When I attain Buddhahood in the future, all the sentient beings who reside in that land will be those who are willing to give and who are not particularly miserly. They are unlike those for whom plucking a single hair from their nostril, as a Tibetan saying goes, is so painful that it causes tears of blood to fall from their eyes. There is indeed such an expression to describe extreme stinginess. I am not quite sure how to express this in Chinese. In any case, plucking even a single hair from the nostril is quite painful. It refers to people who find even the slightest thought of giving, such as going out to share a meal together or taking out a few coins, to be a source of tremendous pain and sorrow. The beings in a pure land are not like this. When a person who practices generosity attains Buddhahood in the future, everyone around them will be willing to give. None will be miserly. They will not be surrounded by misers at all. Instead, everyone around them will be very generous. For example, after a meal, everyone would compete to pay the bill. 3 or 4 people might all scramble to be the one who pays. In the end, when there's really no other choice, the restaurant owner might say, well then, if it cannot be helped, today this person pays, tomorrow that person, and the day after the other. The owner says this with a purpose, as it creates 3 business opportunities. And they all agree, yes, that is right, we will listen to you. We will come back tomorrow and the day after as well. In such a land, everyone is willing to give. This is a wonderful state of being. Actually, regarding generosity, whether it is the gift of Dharma or material gifts, as Master Janren's brief commentary states, the beings to whom we now practice giving and renunciation, when we attain Buddhahood in the future, or when we reach the fruit level of a noble being, they will all be born together in that land. They will all transfer there together. For instance, if we practice material generosity today, and I perform a charitable act that involves 500 people, then these 500 karmic connections will lead us to be born together in a pure Buddha land. The same principle applies to the generosity of Dharma. Through the generosity of Dharma, all beings who have formed a karmic connection with us through the Dharma will be born together with us in that Buddha land. The Sutra of 100 Karmas also contains such accounts. In a past life of Shakyamuni Buddha, he offered his own body as an act of generosity to 5 Brahmins. When he attained enlightenment, they became his first 5 bhiksus. There is such a story as well. So our present practice of generosity establishes a wonderful, wholesome connection for our future enlightenment and our future Buddha land. Generosity is truly beneficial. Through generosity, every sentient being experiences joy. The great treatise on the perfection of wisdom also states that whether it is a large gift or a small one, there is not a single sentient being who does not feel joy upon receiving generosity. When you give to sentient beings, even animals or those who were once bitter enemies will feel joy. So the best approach at times is still to practice generosity and give to others. They may not feel a sense of gratitude temporarily, but overall, sentient beings will feel joy. Sometimes when I clear out clutter at home, there is a lama at our monastery who says, "No problem, give me whatever you cannot use. I will give those things to others and they will be happy." I asked, "But these things are no longer usable, are they? It seems they have no use at all." He replied, It is fine, I will give them to others, as there is surely someone in need. Regarding so-called generosity, while one person may not need something, another person might. For them, the gift still holds meaning, either directly or indirectly. So while we are in the causal stage, learning to be generous is extremely beneficial. In the future, your own Buddha land will be filled with generous people. Otherwise, if you were surrounded entirely by misers in the future, that Buddha land would be quite frightening, wouldn't it? So, what comes next? Morality is the Bodhisattva's pure land. This is a very profound teaching. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who have fulfilled their vows to practice the path of the 10 types of good come to be born in his country. Observing the precepts constitutes the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. When you attain Buddhahood, everyone there practices the 10 virtuous actions. By practicing what we call the 10 virtuous actions, one fulfills the aspirations of all sentient beings. Furthermore, all these beings are born within this Buddha land. As Master Sengjiao also noted, to what are the immeasurable precepts ultimately reduced? They are encompassed within the 10 virtuous actions. While the various precepts are originally very numerous, including the Bodhisattva precepts and the individual liberation precepts, practicing the 10 virtuous actions is actually a superb way to encompass all of them. In fact, the 10 virtuous actions are not merely a Buddhist doctrine. One could say they constitute a universal code of moral conduct for all of humanity. It can be expressed in this way. If you visit any country in the world, everyone would agree that the 10 non-virtuous actions are things that nobody wishes to experience. These include actions such as killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, false speech, harsh words, and divisive speech, and having a mind of anger, covetousness, and wrong views. Every country has its own slightly differing rules, and there are minor differences in their particular ethical standards. However, in most cases, one should say that the principles spoken of by the Buddha apply to every one of us, whether you are a Buddhist or a non-Buddhist, and whether you have taken formal precepts or not. It remains true that whoever practices these negative deeds will naturally plant an evil root within the genetic makeup of their consciousness. This happens if you plant a seed of negativity. If you engage in such non-virtuous acts, it harms you. Conversely, if you practice the 10 virtuous actions, it will naturally bring tremendously beneficial things into your life. Therefore, observing the precepts is extremely important. In the practice of observing precepts, the 10 virtuous actions serve as the foundation. Vimalakirti does not discuss the higher Bodhisattva precepts or Vajrayana precepts here. Thus, one should focus on practicing the 10 virtuous actions. From the Mahayana perspective, those who fulfill the aspirations of beings will eventually be born into this Buddha land. Next, we discuss forbearance. Forbearance is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who have ornamented themselves with the 32 marks come to be born in his country. Cultivating forbearance constitutes the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. When you attain Buddhahood, your followers will be just like the Buddha himself, or as a universal monarch is adorned with the 32 marks. Forbearance is indeed very important. If one regularly practices forbearance, they will summon a magnificent appearance life after life. As the Entering the Middle Way says, patience produces beautiful form and the joy of the noble. By practicing forbearance, one experiences an exquisite appearance. One will possess a magnificent presence in every lifetime. The phrase joy of the noble means that everyone will naturally delight in your presence. Conversely, if one has not practiced forbearance, their appearance may be unpleasant, causing many people to dislike them. In fact, whether in ancient times or in the modern day, people still pay a great deal of attention to physical form. Although such form is ultimately illusory, if a person possesses a relatively attractive appearance, regardless of whether they are male or female, it remains somewhat important in this worldly life. However, there is a common drawback for those with magnificent appearances. They may develop a certain character flaw. Generally, those with magnificent appearances tend to be more arrogant. They may feel superior while standing before others, perhaps without even realizing they have such a tendency. Yet the truth is that a magnificent appearance is something that can be generated from within one's own mind. As we mentioned, forbearance is the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. There is a saying, appearance arises from the mind. In the West, there is a story that is quite similar to this concept. A certain artist specifically needed to find models for a work with a religious theme. He intended to paint. He needed to paint two specific types of figures, one an angel and the other a devil. He went searching everywhere for them. During his search, he found a 10-year-old child who possessed a very magnificent, pure, and beautiful appearance. He used the child as his model and painted his portrait. He completed the portrait of the angel. The painting was exceptionally successful. Later, when he set out to find a model for the devil, he could not find anyone who looked particularly hideous. He continued his search for a long time. However, despite his efforts, he still could not find a suitable person. Many years passed by. After more than 10 years had elapsed, he was in a bar one evening where he encountered a man who looked exceptionally hideous and frightening. He used this man as the model for the devil and painted him. This painting also turned out very well. Both the portraits of the angel and the devil were remarkable. However, there was an extraordinary and strange coincidence. In reality, these two models were actually the same person. When this young man was 10 years old, he had a kind heart and a very magnificent appearance. But due to his later education and various other circumstances, he began to engage in excessive drinking and gambling. He committed all kinds of evil acts without exception. Eventually, he became a completely destitute vagrant. When the painter realized this, he saw that he had been looking at the same person all along. When this man was practicing virtue, he truly looked like an angel. Later, because of various factors, he became a wrongdoer, and at that stage he had become like a devil. His appearance had also become hideous, there is such a saying. Whether this particular story is fact or fiction, the principle remains. In Buddhism, we often say that all phenomena are created by the mind. Indeed, we can observe this truth for ourselves. A person who possesses a very kind heart and who frequently helps others will make everyone feel, wow, I truly like this person. Even if such a person is not conventionally attractive, they still leave everyone with a very positive impression. However, once a person begins to commit all manner of evil without restraint, at that point, even if their physical appearance is somewhat pleasing, many people will eventually feel afraid and will stay far away from them. In the end, such a person may even come to view themselves as a devil. They have transformed into such a state. Therefore, the practice of forbearance is of great significance in this regard as well. Regarding the practice of forbearance, people in the world often pursue qualities like a fine appearance and a long life. However, if we have not cultivated forbearance, it is very difficult to achieve these goals in either this life or the next. Bodhisattva Santideva says, in the way of the Bodhisattva, through patience practiced in successive lives, one gains beauty, health, and freedom from obstacles. If one practices forbearance life after life, their appearance will become magnificent. Furthermore, their body will be exceptionally healthy. The text continues, and a long renown and life as joyous as a wheel-turning king. One's lifespan will be extensive, and their virtuous name will spread far and wide, reaching every corner of the world. They will be like a universal monarch or a great king. All of a person's wealth and all of these perfections will manifest naturally in the present life without needing great effort. They arrive of their own accord. Many of us are very concerned about our physical appearance and our personal health. We worry about our reputation and how long we might remain in this world. In reality, these outcomes are related to whether we lose our temper all day long. Some people warn, all of you need to be careful. Do not make me lose my temper. Otherwise, I might not remain in this world for much longer. I will show the sign of passing into nirvana. However, if you are losing your temper all day long, that anger itself is the primary cause of a short life and many illnesses. Sometimes we attribute all causes and conditions to others, but in reality, it has everything to do with our own mind. Now, let us discuss exertion. The text says, exertion is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who have energetically cultivated all the merit come to be born in his country. Exertion is actually the source of all excellent qualities. If one possesses a mind of exertion, that mind is the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. When you attain Buddhahood, a gathering of exceptionally diligent beings will come to your land. We can observe differences among certain Dharma teachers and differences among certain teachers as well. Some teachers, perhaps due to the state of their own mind, are surrounded by followers who are not diligent and are entirely lazy. They have to use a metaphorical whip every day, saying, "Oh, why are you not diligent? You are all oversleeping. The entire class has failed to show up today. Why is this? Some teachers actually start to cry out of frustration saying, how can I be so unfortunate? All of the most difficult children in the entire school are in my class. They are all unattractive, dull, and foolish. In truth, this environment is produced by one's own mind. Perhaps because you were not diligent in a past life, all of your followers are now lacking diligence as well. This truly relates to the mind. The scope of a sentient being's land is something we can feel even now. For an entrepreneur, the competence level of the people surrounding them is fundamentally related to the entrepreneur themselves. Therefore, many of us in management should reflect on this. What is your surrounding environment like? Is it virtuous or is it unwholesome? If it is virtuous, half of the reason may be due to them, but the other half is related to you. Thus, if we possess diligence, as many scriptures and treatises state, diligence has a very direct and significant impact on our virtuous dharma. The Mahayana Sutra of the 6 Paramitas says, just as wind fans a fire, making a small flame great, so too does diligence expand and broaden virtuous dharma. The nature of diligence is exactly the same. Even if a virtue is very small, it will grow greater and greater through the power of diligence. Originally, the fire may be quite small, but driven by the wind, that flame can become a roaring fire. By the same principle, if a person is diligent, even if they are not exceptionally intelligent or exceptionally talented, their wisdom will continuously grow like a flame in a very short period of time. Conversely, if you are particularly indolent, you may believe you are very wise or successful, but in reality you will make no real progress in many affairs of the mundane and supramundane. Therefore, in our Buddhist communities, we cannot afford to be indolent. In this brief human life, everyone should strive to follow the genuine paramita of exertion in Mahayana Buddhism. While this is not easy for us, I still believe that we must remain exertion. Every day one should establish their own specific tasks for practicing virtue and set clear requirements for such practice. In this way one can truly rouse their exertion. Sometimes it is necessary to feel a certain amount of pressure. This includes those of us currently listening to classes online. Some Dharma friends are constantly pushing themselves to keep putting in effort, regardless of how tired they feel. I especially admire those in different time zones across various countries who still find every possible way to attend. For those who truly cannot attend today, they make sure not to miss a single class the following day. This kind of exertion is very admirable. If we lack self-discipline and exertion, it seems that many of us ordinary beings are exactly like foolish and immature children. Many immature children, without a teacher or parental guidance, if left entirely to their own will, might not even finish primary school. Playing every day is their only purpose. I once posted on Weibo, ordinary beings are just a group of naughty and immature children. I remember how I expressed it then. I felt that without a teacher or the guidance of an elder, we would simply play amidst the 5 objects of desire every day. Beyond that, we would have no self-awareness. But when you reach a certain level of realization, you will find that you cannot set your diligence aside, even if you want to, because you see sentient beings in the midst of deep suffering and looking at your own brief human life. You will certainly exert your greatest effort to practice virtue and benefit others. This is the essence of exertion. Next is the paramita of meditative concentration. Meditation is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who control their minds and keep them undisturbed come to be born in his country. Meditation serves as the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. This means that when you attain Buddhahood, you gather the mind without scatter. The Tibetan and the Tang dynasty translations use the terms right mindfulness and right awareness. One enters meditation through right awareness and right mindfulness. Beings of this nature are born in that land. The phrase gathering the mind without scatter shares the same meaning as right awareness and right mindfulness. They both refer to the same state of mind. This quality is also very important. If the mind remains constantly scattered, there is no way to succeed in any endeavor. One must possess the ability to gather the mind without scatter. Gathering the mind without scatter does not necessarily mean that you must stay in one fixed place, meditating all day without ever going out. That may not be the intended meaning, then what is the meaning? It means that in whatever virtuous dharma you practice, your mind can remain focused. For instance, if you are reciting a mantra, you should recite it with full attention. If you are attending a class, listen to the teaching with full attention. If you are performing volunteer service, do that task with genuine care and diligence. Whatever task you undertake, some people are naturally very focused in this way. This quality is highly necessary. Otherwise, a person without concentration, one lacking right awareness and right mindfulness, will do a bit of this and a bit of that without any consistency. Lacking focus and a clear beginning or end, whatever such a person does will ultimately be incomplete. Therefore, each of us should consider what we ought to be doing in this world. For instance, if you have a class to teach, you must complete that class with sincere care. This is very important. If you listen to a class from beginning to end, vowing to listen to the Vimalakirti Sutra, then regardless of what arises, even if some reasonings do not accord with your own thinking, you should still listen. This is the genuine wisdom of the Buddha's era. Placing this requirement on yourself is very necessary. Sometimes when we read books related to Western culture or various books from different Eastern cultures, we might find it difficult to continue reading. However, if we feel there must be some meaning within and we continue reading with a focused mind, we can persist. In fact, this kind of mental focus allows each of us to turn the gaze inward and use right awareness and right mindfulness to observe our own mind. If the mind is not focused, it is impossible to carry anything through to completion. There is a contemporary concept called the multitasking era. Because of the current information explosion, one might check WeChat here and Weibo there, while simultaneously watching TV and sending messages to others on a phone. It is as if one is holding various devices at the same moment, making calls and watching TV all at once. However, this causes the mind to become completely scattered and unfocused. In the end, your efficiency will remain very low. If you truly want to accomplish something, you must complete tasks one by one from start to finish. Only then will that work be done exceptionally well. There's a maxim among the great masters of old: when you are walking, only after one foot is planted firmly on the ground should you then lift the other foot. This is a very sound principle. For a person who lacks wisdom, attempting to do many things at the same time is actually quite unreasonable. Our spiritual practice follows this same principle. One must gather the mind without scatter. Regarding this state of gathering the mind without scatter, I have encountered many modern explanations that offer various different interpretations. They are all quite beneficial. We can sometimes apply this meditation practice to our everyday worldly lives as well. In this present era, in what way can we receive and apply these teachings? I have often shared this thought with our volunteer staff. Our various teams have different people performing different tasks. Whatever work you undertake is a result of your own choice. It is definitely your own choice. No one is being forced. Except for those who are in prison, there is no such thing as compulsion. Inmates may not wish to perform a task but are still required to do so. Prisoners in many countries find themselves in similar situations. But for the majority of us, since it is our own choice, we must perform that work with genuine care. This is very important. We often claim, I am a very conscientious person, but are you truly being conscientious? Sometimes one merely thinks they are conscientious, while in reality it is difficult to say for certain. Therefore, in whatever you do, you should turn the gaze inward. For instance, take a moment to reflect on what you're doing right now. Consider my own situation. What class am I teaching, or what text am I translating? I apply my greatest and most diligent effort to every task. This is the application of concentration, gathering the mind without scatter. This is one of the 6 paramitas. Wisdom is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who have achieved correct concentration come to be born in his country. Regarding correct concentration mentioned here, according to Master Kuiji's interpretation, among ordinary beings in general, there are beings of correct concentration, beings of wrong concentration, and the indeterminate. The levels of wisdom and concentration vary among different beings. Some truly possess states of meditative absorption and wisdom, others do not. Those who have realized the selflessness of persons are called correct concentration. Such beings of correct concentration are born in that Buddha land. When you are born in this land, you will find that what is called correct concentration or wisdom here is not what we ordinarily consider to be clever intelligence. That kind of petty cleverness cannot be called wisdom. The wisdom that realizes emptiness is what is truly called wisdom. Only the realization of emptiness can be called wisdom. This wisdom of realizing emptiness is very profound. In the Zongjing record it is said, the first 5 paramitas are like the blind. Prajna is like their guide. The first 5 paramitas are like a person who is blind, while prajna serves as the guide. Why is this said? The explanation provided there is excellent. For example, regarding the paramita of generosity, if it is not embraced by wisdom and not sustained by prajna, then the fruits of that generosity, such as wealth and prosperity, will be exhausted in a short time. They cannot continue indefinitely. As for observing the precepts, it may lead to rebirth in the higher realms. But this reward, too, will come to an end after its brief fruition and cannot carry on. Regarding forbearance, one's magnificent appearance may last for a life or two, but after that it cannot be sustained further. Even with exertion, though one accumulates many qualities across successive lives, these rewards will also end after a brief period. Finally, regarding meditation, one may gather the mind and avoid rebirth in the lower realms of samsara. However, if it is not embraced by the paramita of prajna, one will merely be reborn in the form or formless realms. Eventually, even that worldly concentration will come to an end. So why do we emphasize the paramita of prajna? As we have discussed before, the paramita of prajna allows you to truly understand the nature of reality. All the wholesome roots you have cultivated are then sustained and sealed by a tremendously powerful force. Once they are sealed, those wholesome roots will not be exhausted until you attain Buddhahood. It is just like a person's money. If held in one's own hands, a spendthrift will run through it in no time. But if it is placed in a high-interest fixed-term account within a very reliable bank, it will not be easily depleted along the way. As the Zongjing record states, if all virtues lack prajna, they merely become the cause of conditioned existence. If all virtuous deeds are not sustained by prajna, they easily become causes of conditioned existence. As causes of conditioned existence, their rewards will disappear very quickly. They do not accord with the unconditioned fruit of enlightenment. In reality, we have a great need for every wholesome root to be embraced by the paramita of wisdom. This ensures that it becomes a long-lasting wholesome root in the future. This is a very important point. This is why all the great masters throughout history have emphasized that one must practice the paramita of prajna. If the paramita of prajna is absent, then our generosity, our discipline, and all the diverse practices of the 6 paramitas will ultimately lack significant meaning. This is the fundamental reason behind such teachings. Everyone should understand this principle. If your practice is embraced by the wisdom of emptiness, even as our physical forms continue to change through the cycle of the 6 realms, the merit will remain. Otherwise, certain conditioned wholesome roots will simply run out at a certain point as your identity changes. It is similar to shooting an arrow into the sky. When its initial force is spent, it inevitably falls to the ground. However, if that arrow is propelled by a very special kind of force, it can continue traveling for a very great distance. By the same principle, the generosity we practice constitutes an accumulation of merit. On its own, it cannot endure for a very long time. But if it is guided by the wisdom of the paramita of prajna, then until the attainment of Buddhahood, it will not easily be exhausted along the way. This is the core reason. When you have the opportunity, you should also study the Zongjing record. Within the Zongjing record, the essential teachings of many scriptures and treatises are compiled. It contains especially useful instructions from the great masters of the past. The following section discusses the 4 immeasurables. The 4 immeasurables are the Bodhisattva's Buddha land. This means that when you attain Buddhahood, beings characterized by loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity will be born in this land. As for the 4 immeasurables, everyone knows. When cultivating bodhicitta, one first practices the 4 immeasurables. including those in our various classes here. Everyone is currently practicing these 4. I have heard that the results have been very positive. We are following the instructions in the A Guide to the Words of My Perfect Teacher by Khenpo Ngawang Palzang. The meditation methods described therein are very detailed. It is a practice endowed with great blessings. Therefore, everyone is diligently practicing the 4 immeasurables. This content is fairly easy to grasp, so I will not elaborate further. Next, the 4 unlimited states of mind are the Bodhisattva's pure land. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who have developed sympathy, compassion, joy, and equanimity come to be born in his pure land. These comprise loving words, generosity, beneficial conduct, and sharing in activities. The 4 means of attraction are the Bodhisattva's pure land. This means that when the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings who have been attracted through his emancipation come to be born in his country. The 4 means of attraction are discussed in great detail in the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. Am I perhaps speaking too quickly today? I have other matters to attend to shortly. If the translators find it difficult to keep up, please accept my apologies. I also have not had much water to drink. When I used to provide simultaneous interpretation for His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, he would sometimes speak at an especially rapid pace. I could barely catch my breath by the end of the session. This was because I had to listen and translate at the same time. That process is truly very exhausting. We are almost at the conclusion now. Regarding these 6 paramitas and 4 means of attraction, actually, with the 4 means of attraction, there is a mention of generosity, which also appears in the 6 paramitas. Generosity is present in both lists. The distinction between them is as follows. In the context of the 6 paramitas, generosity primarily serves to eliminate the suffering of hunger and thirst among beings. That is its primary objective. In contrast, within the 4 means of attraction, the practice not only eliminates the suffering of beings, but also embraces them and places them upon the path of liberation. That is the key difference. Next is the practice of loving words, which involves speaking in a gentle and soft manner. Of course, loving words in this context does not necessarily mean using only sweet and tender language. Sometimes, when working to benefit beings, what are classified as loving words may not always appear to be especially gentle on the surface. As long as the speech can effectively guide beings and tame their minds, it can be rightfully called loving words. I will not explain beneficial conduct and sharing in activities, as these should be clear. Regarding beneficial conduct specifically, in all our actions we should maintain a mindset and behavior aimed at helping others. This approach makes it much easier to connect with sentient beings. Finally, sharing in activities means leading by example, where your own conduct is the primary teaching. If I want to guide sentient beings toward a certain path, at the very least I should practice what I preach. For instance, if I were a teacher and I instructed my students to study diligently, but I myself went to bars every day and indulged in various frivolous entertainment activities. If I then told them to focus on their books, how would the students react? The answer is obvious. However, if the teacher is exceptionally dedicated to learning, then naturally and imperceptibly, everyone will gradually be influenced by that example. Therefore, a person's impact is closely linked, especially for a bodhisattva, with the aspiration to guide beings. Their success is very closely related to their own conduct. Sometimes, regarding certain important matters, it is best to act personally. This is the approach I value most. Merely talking about it is insufficient. Of course, discussing the Dharma is also very beneficial. The other day, a Khenpo and I were conversing. I told him, "You speak very well. Your mind seems especially well stocked with ideas, and your imagination is very rich, but the actual work you do is quite minimal." I said this partly in jest, but it also reflected the truth. He responded, "If these thoughts were not in the mind and not said aloud, that would be even worse. At least expressing these ideas is a good start." I replied, "You have a point there." but ultimately one must take action. It is not enough for a person to just think about it and then speak about it briefly, only touching upon the point. It seems we truly need to put these things into practice. For instance, regarding the practice of generosity, suppose there is a being here who is in a pitiful state. One person does not think about helping at all. Another person considers it only in their mind. A third person expresses the intention aloud. But if no one actually gives anything, the suffering of that being cannot be eliminated. Therefore, we should sometimes go and act personally. In the context of the 6 paramitas and 4 means of attraction, a bodhisattva's conduct involves generosity, loving words, and sharing in activities. Even more vital is personally engaging in actions that benefit others. Even if it is just a small gesture, you should do it yourself. One should learn to be a bit more active and diligent. I feel that many bodhisattvas are doing very well. Some Dharma friends within our Larungar, for the most part, are not arrogant. Almost everyone carries themselves without airs. In fact, they have no pretensions at all. Accomplishing whatever needs to be done to the best of one's ability is a very noble quality. If something truly cannot be achieved, it is best to say so directly. I am unable to handle this task. Otherwise, many people nowadays tend to defer and deflect. On the surface, they may appear helpful, but deep down, they have no real wish to help beings. There are many such mindsets and behaviors. This is not the conduct of a true practitioner. My point is that in everything we do, everyone still needs to be earnest and sincere. Moving on. We might not finish the entire section today. Skillful means are the bodhisattva's pure land. When the bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings whose skillful means are without hindrance regarding all the dharmas come to be born in his country. This refers to skillful means or upaya. Skillful means is the bodhisattva's Buddha land. This means that when you attain Buddhahood, you must have a skillful approach toward every phenomenon. The Tibetan version also uses the term skillful examination. The Tang Dynasty translation also seems to use unobstructed. Translations vary. One version emphasizes possessing skillful means, another being skilled in examination. Beings with such qualities will come to this land. This implies that if we apply skillful means to everything we do, even if the deed itself is small, its ultimate result will be very positive. In Master Kuiji's commentary, he speaks of dedication and rescue. Dedicating merit is an excellent, skillful means for benefiting beings. The same applies to acts of rescue. These are actions that uproot and relieve the suffering of all beings. Activities like life release or poverty relief are also considered very effective, skillful means. Regarding skillful examination, these beings are adept at analyzing situations. If you consistently apply skillful means and examination at the causal stage, then once the fruition is attained, these beings will likewise be born in your land. Therefore, everything we do now is truly significant. In any given situation, if a person possesses skillful means and the ability to examine properly, the task can be successfully accomplished. If you lack these qualities, then the task simply cannot be done. This holds true in the mundane world and is equally true for practitioners. When we are sustained by bodhicitta and the 3 supreme methods, even a very minor positive act will yield an immensely vast result. If we lack such skillful means, then our endeavors can never reach true completion or perfection. Consider the simple act of reciting the 6-syllable mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. I often reflect on this in the context of modern technology. When I was young, I spent my days carving the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. I would carve it onto stones and write it on trees and cliff faces. In fact, this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, is described in the scriptures as possessing extraordinarily vast merit. It benefits any being who sees its form or hears its sound. Regarding the Tibetan script of Om Mani Padme Hum, those of you who have mastered digital tools in the future should share the Dharma through various video and audio channels. For example, almost everyone uses a smartphone nowadays, and everyone has access to a computer. While some people might lack deep faith, it is still helpful just to let the mantra flash before their eyes for a moment. If you send a message on WeChat, for instance, I often find that when I'm extremely busy, regardless of whether the recipient actually enjoys coffee, sending a coffee emoji seems like a polite gesture. However, I realize that seeing a coffee emoji has little lasting value. If I send the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum instead, it could plant a wholesome seed within that person. This illustrates how skillful means can be applied. Though the action is very simple, the actual benefit it provides is tremendously great. It is similar to generating bodhicitta. The merit of this method is immense. Buddhism offers many such profound methods, and the Vajrayana tradition has them as well. As we discussed recently in the Ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, having wisdom without skillful means leads to bondage. Likewise, having means without wisdom also leads to bondage. The importance of balancing these two is highlighted here. Thus, the text mentions being unobstructed in skillful means. Beings with this quality are born into that pure land. The next passage states that when the Bodhisattva attains Buddhahood, sentient beings who have accomplished the foundations of mindfulness, correct exertions, numinous capabilities, faculties, powers, and the noble path come to be born in his country. This refers to the 37 factors of enlightenment. On the small path of accumulation, one practices the 4 foundations of mindfulness. On the middle path of accumulation, there are the 4 correct exertions. On the great path of accumulation, there are the 4 numinous capabilities. Then upon reaching the path of preparation, which consists of 4 distinct stages, the first 2 stages involve the 5 faculties. The last 2 stages are the stage of tolerance and the highest worldly dharma. The earlier stages, warmth and peak, correspond to the 5 faculties, while the latter 2 stages correspond to the 5 powers. On the path of seeing, the first ground, one practices the 7 limbs of awakening. Then on the path of meditation, from the 2nd to the 10th ground, one practices the noble 8-fold path. Such practitioners are born into that Buddha land. Of course, regarding these 37 factors of enlightenment, the Gateway to Knowledge explains that the Mahayana version differs from the Hinayana. For example, in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Hinayana focuses on observing one's own body, contemplating the body, feelings, and the mind. The Mahayana extends this to the bodies and minds of all sentient beings. Furthermore, in the Hinayana, suffering, emptiness, and non-self are viewed as the ultimate truth. But in the Mahayana tradition, on the conventional level, these are seen as dreams and illusions. On the ultimate level, even suffering, emptiness, and non-self do not truly exist. I'm not sure if you have read the Gateway to Knowledge yet. Our typeset version might be too small and appears very thin. I have seen the English version. It consists of 3 thick volumes. They must have translated it quite a long time ago. However, I wonder if they have actually studied it. Translating without studying achieves very little in the end. Simply having a translation of a book does not mean one necessarily understands its profound content. True understanding only manifests after genuine teaching and study. Otherwise, as seen in Chinese and Tibetan Buddhist history, a vast number of texts were translated, but many were simply left on shelves, never actually studied. It is a great pity when such knowledge remains unlearned. When I visited certain Western universities, I found the adornment of the Middle Way, the Nagarjuna's precious garland, and the Uttara Tantra Shastra all available. Yet when I asked a professor about the overview of Madhyamaka as taught in the adornment of the Middle Way, he merely used the phrase skillful means to deflect the question. You understand what I mean by that. In this brief human life, I truly believe that understanding the actual contents of these treatises is incredibly valuable. There is still so much content remaining. Very well then. The attitude of rededication is the Bodhisattva's pure land. When the Bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, they gain a land complete with all inner and outer merits. Dedication of merit is of paramount importance. The Avatamsaka Sutra states, "A Bodhisattva's power of aspiration pervades all, just as true suchness exists everywhere, seen or unseen. All are encompassed." This means that after dedication, both the seen and the unseen receive the benefits of our practice. For instance, when we recite that the king of aspiration today, beings we have encountered and those we have not all gain merit. All such merits are thus dedicated. When a bodhisattva dedicates merit through the power of aspiration, all beings, whether seen or unseen, receive the benefits. As the text states, he attains a country that is complete in all forms of merit. Therefore, a bodhisattva's dedication of merit is of immense importance. Next, explaining how to eliminate the 8 difficult realms is the bodhisattva's pure land. When the bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, his country is without the 3 evil destinations and 8 difficult realms. Teaching the eliminate the 8 difficult realms means proclaiming the path to eliminate these states constitutes the bodhisattva's pure land. This refers to the 8 conditions of non-leisure. When these conditions are removed, one attains leisure, as everyone knows. When this bodhisattva attains Buddhahood, there are no 3 lower realms within that Buddha land. Some versions describe it as proclaiming the absence of the 3 lower realms. These refer to the 3 lower states of existence. In reality, the 3 lower realms are already included within the 8 difficult realms. The Tibetan translation does not explicitly mention the 3 lower realms. Instead, it states that the land is free from all lower realms. This refers to the 8 unfree states mentioned below. As we all know, the 8 unfree states consist of the 3 lower realms, long-life gods and remote borderlands, as well as living during a time when no Buddha has appeared. These are explained in the words of my perfect teacher. They are the hell realms, hungry ghosts, animals, remote borderlands, long-life gods, wrong views, a time when no Buddha appears, and being physically impaired, such as being mute or deaf. The text states that none of these unfortunate beings exist in that land. Maintaining one's own practice of the precepts means keeping the moral discipline. Without reviling the deficiencies of others means refraining from speaking of the faults and shortcomings of other people, is the bodhisattva's pure land. When the bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, that land contains not even the name of transgression. In that realm, the very concept of breaking a precept does not exist. Transgression here specifically refers to violating the precepts. This result comes because we have maintained our own discipline, while refraining from pointing out the faults of others. Some who keep the precepts become very arrogant about it. Their precepts are impure, that person is not good, they often say. However, in general, it is best not to speak in such a way, except for those in administrative roles, who sometimes have no choice but to address these issues. Beyond that, if we avoid such criticism, our pure land will eventually manifest this way. In your future land, even the name of precept transgression will not exist. If you spend your days acting out, breaking the precepts yourself while constantly telling others how impure they are, then there is no telling what your future land will turn into. Next, the 10 goods are the bodhisattva's pure land. When the bodhisattva achieves Buddhahood, sentient beings whose lifespans are not interrupted. This is related to the precept against killing. By not killing, one avoids an untimely death. Life will not be cut short prematurely. By not stealing, one attains great wealth. Refraining from stealing or taking what is not given results in having great merit and immense riches. By avoiding sexual misconduct, one practices pure brahmacharya. In that land, all inhabitants live a life of pure conduct. By not lying, one becomes truthful in all words. Because you have never lied, whatever you say is realized as truth. By not speaking harshly, one will always use gentle words. Within that realm, everyone communicates using gentle language. Next, by refraining from divisive speech, who do not isolate themselves from their subordinates and who are good at resolving disputes. Because you avoided divisive speech in the past, your virtuous friends and followers will remain by your side. Furthermore, even if some disputes were to arise, they would all be easily reconciled. By avoiding idle chatter, whose words are always beneficial. By not being covetous, no jealousy will arise in that land. As we know, jealousy is largely rooted in our own greed. Then by who are not prone to anger and having no harmful intent, along with no wrong views, you will have and who have correct views. These comprise the 10 virtuous actions. Come to be born in his country. These beings will take birth within this pure land. The rest of the passage can be explained in a similar way. This is not a difficult concept and should be understood like this. All right, we shall conclude today's teaching here. It might take one more class to finish this chapter. Is there much left? Not much. Not much, I assume. Okay.
Bandara Banma Sodargye